Welcome back to Inspired or Acquired. This is the podcast where we talk to real business owners, talk real numbers, and ask them whether or not they would sell their business. We actually have a different format today. We're going to slow down with your two co-hosts here and just take a peek behind the curtain and give you a little information and education about how do businesses get valued, what's it like to take them to market, and maybe also talk about a couple accounting pointers, whether you're thinking about buying a business or getting your business ready to sell. So different show format today, but it should be educational, should still be fun and some good stories in there. So Clint, how are you, man? It's good to see you.
What's up, Patrick? Good to see you too, man.
Yeah, it's
I think this will be a fun kind of like inside baseball show where we get to talk shop a little bit about working with business brokerages, working with accounting firms, and what it's like to sell or buy a business, and hopefully get some really good actionable information out of this.
Yeah, I agree. So part of what made me want to do this, we've had a couple of our accounting clients that recently said, like, I'm thinking of selling, like, what is the business worth, or what does this look like? And I think it's something that generally people are curious about. So we'll try to demystify the process. So let's start with you, Clint. Like, if somebody is seeing a business for sale on Dealonomy or some other site, there was a whole lot of steps before that to pick a purchase price, determine how it's presented. Back us up to that. Like, what does the process look like as you start to work with a client and try to figure out what it's worth and take it to market?
Yeah, so there are a lot of steps before it even hits a marketplace. And I get, sometimes I'll tweet a conversation I have with a seller, and people just start bombarding me with, I want to talk to them, I want to hear about this business, and I'm just always like, pump the brakes. It's not ready. We don't move that fast. And there's a reason for that. These companies, we have to qualify them. We have to value them. We have to get them ready to go to market before we go to market. And so I could walk you through some of the basics on that.
Okay.
And just kind of some of those steps. But the first thing we do is just qualify it. And qualifying to me just means, is this business sellable? Is this something that we know we can get done? And a lot of that comes down to, what's the motivation of the seller? Are they realistic about their expectations? And a lot of that goes into the valuation conversation. The biggest disqualifier for us is usually size. So, a lot of times people call wanting to sell when they're just at their wits' end because they're losing money, or they're just struggling with their business, and they're like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to sell. But we don't do that at Dealonomy. We don't do distressed or turnaround type situations. And so that's always a tough conversation. But I'd say a decent percentage of folks that are coming to us, they, it's not too uncommon that someone buys a franchise and they're a year or two deep into it, and they've just realized, I haven't made money. I'm not going to make money. I put a lot into this thing. I was better off doing what I was doing before. Mm-hmm. I'm just wanting to sell my business. And a lot of times they're thinking, I'd be happy if I just get what I got out of it, or something like that. And we have to have that tough conversation. There's some brokers that will take those on and, do those turnarounds or distressed deals. But for us, we typically want to see 3 years of established earnings of $250,000 or more of seller benefit. So that would be like net profit plus what the owner pays themselves and pay perks and benefits. And if we can't get there, we just typically don't have a deal that's easy to promise we can get done.
Okay.
And, early in my career, we would take on more of those, distressed deals, or the very small ones, or the turnarounds. But I just found it was, usually a lot more work for less money as a broker.
Yeah, you're looking for these businesses that have a 3-year track record of $250K of owner cash flow. Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that's a whole thing that people don't understand. Like SDE, seller's discretionary earnings. Like, what Can you just help us understand what is that and how that gets calculated?
Yeah. So first off, the reason we put that minimum at about 250 is because we feel like that's the minimum to get an outside buyer to be able to make a living and service debt. Because I think most buyers that are coming in to work at a business, even at a small business starting point, like they want to be able to make a living and feed their family. And a lot of
Yeah.
people are thinking, I need to be able to make at least 100 or 150. And so you got to have that to live on. And then if you have another 100, then you've got some earnings power to service acquisition debt.
Mm.
And if you're under that, it just becomes, if you have say like 150,000 of profit or SDE earnings, a lot of people look at that and say, man, by the time I finance this and pay the debt, what I'll be able to take home is less than I could just make at a job. And,
Right.
Jobs don't have this risk and responsibility of a business. And so it just turns off a lot of would-be buyers.
Okay.
And so we like to deal with that. But to answer your question about SDE, it's funny because this is where our worlds kind of collide, because I feel like really good accountants are really good at taking every advantage of the tax code for the business owner. And there's a lot you can do. That's part of what's great about being a small business owner in the United States is, people complain about all the tax strategies that big businesses take to reduce their income or their income tax paid. But like the small business owner can do a lot of those same strategies and really reduce their taxable income. And so a lot of times when you see a small business owner's tax returns, it doesn't look very impressive in terms of what the amount of income they're paying tax on. But when you reverse engineer that tax strategy, you often find there's a lot of earnings power there. And so I'll give you an example of, you may have a common situation is you'll have like a husband and wife both on the payroll. Maybe one of them is doing minimal work. They might just be doing some data entry work or something that's light work, but they're getting like a good salary, mainly so they can get Social Security benefits later in life, or they're maxing out a 401k program inside that business that they're benefiting from as a couple.
Yeah.
And then you may have them buying their personal SUVs or trucks in the business that they're also, accelerating the depreciation on and getting tax benefits that way because they use it for business as well. And maybe they're renting out their home office, or they're writing off some square footage of their house because they work from home sometimes. Just all those types of things you can do as a small business owner are expenses you can expense against your business income, or and sometimes they're phantom expenses like depreciation is, for example.
Yeah.
And by the time you go in as a broker and you basically recast the financials, is what we call this process, is you build up the earning stream to show, okay, what if this business owner was only paying the necessary business expenses, and any of the SDE just stands for seller's discretionary income or seller's discretionary earnings. And the discretionary part would be the things like, okay, you didn't have to do that home office deduction. You didn't have to do that SUV purchase that you depreciated. You didn't have to fund that 401k. Like all those were essentially benefits to you as the owner while you own this business. And so SDE basically reverse engineers that tax strategy and shows, okay, on a normal year, if you came in and bought this business and you didn't have any debt on it and you were just working full time, paying yourself zero, like and all your expenses were just the necessary ones for running the business.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most profit this company could make on a normal year? And like, that's a different answer than what's the profit you're telling the IRS you make.
Yeah.
And that might sound a little shady, but it's not. It's just, if you do it right, I think people get in trouble when they try to obfuscate or do like under the table shady stuff. But you can do this the right way, and I hope that you can maybe enlighten us a little bit to that, because it's a breath of fresh air for me when a company has a good accounting team
Mhm.
and they're doing things right so that we can prove those add backs or those adjustments to SDE. And maybe you could share with that for a second of like, when you've got a client at Appletree, for example, and they're thinking, I want to sell my business someday. What are some things like you do with your accounting team to make sure that they can have their cake and eat it too? And that would mean they get the most tax deductions they legally can,
Yeah.
while also they can prove to banks and brokers and buyers that they do have a strong earnings business. Like, do you have some top tips on how you would handle that?
Hey guys, want to take a quick break from the show to thank one of our sponsors and tell you all about them. So Eversight is the company and our sponsor. They were actually a guest on the podcast, and they're somebody that I've used for digital marketing. A couple of things that I love about Eversight. Normally, if you go to design a website and have somebody really do it well, they're going to charge a big 10 to 20K upfront fee, and then you'll get charged hourly anytime there's updates. So Eversight totally flipped the model. They do a monthly subscription that covers great designs and unlimited updates. I use them for my website, and then they can also help with SEO, AdWords, and all your ongoing content needs. They're a great team. They're responsive. I believe in them. I know them. They're a guest on the podcast, so we don't take sponsorship lightly. And I'm a big fan. So I would definitely encourage you to check them out if you've been thinking about beefing up your digital marketing or possibly doing a new website. You can go to eversight.com/inspired and tell them that you found them on the podcast. And back to the show. You definitely want to always have like good, clean financials that are closed every single month. You don't want to have a lot of things in like ask my accountant that are unclear. You want to make sure that your books match the tax return. That often doesn't happen if like a lot of things are getting depreciated on the tax return, and then you're not having QuickBooks Online match up. And then, if you're taking other owner benefits like, paying for the health insurance, paying for the owner's vehicle, family on payroll, meals and entertainment, like all those things, you just want to make sure they're clearly marked so that as you go add them back to create that SDE number, that it's really clear. I think we like, I tell people we're like a 7 out of 10 aggressive on like tax stuff, like trying to get them all the deductions, but you just want to make sure that it's legit and it's all there, especially the last couple of years before you sell, right? Every dollar of SDE, you're going to get a multiple of. So you want to make sure that you're really showing that with the business and with your tax return, so that you can maximize it at sale. And yeah, those are kind of some of those tax strategies. And then obviously like having good, clean financials that are looked over, up to date, accurate, so that when somebody digs in, there's not a lot of question marks there. Goes a long way.
And just, the simple things like closing your books in a timely manner every month. When you get into a deal, when you sign an LOI, for example, and you start headed towards diligence and closing, you're going to get asked for your interim financials regularly between LOI and closing. And it's a huge red flag if you're always struggling to close your books. It makes it look like you don't have your act together and you're maybe trying to hide something or do some financial engineering. And so if you can just have that habit of wrapping up your books, within a week of the end of the month is a good rule of thumb, I think. And so that, when it's July 12th and someone asks how, do you have your June numbers? You say, yeah, I got them. Here you go. Yeah. And it makes your life a lot easier. One of the other things I really like, Patrick, I hope you're doing this with your clients, but it makes my life easier, is when you just kind of separate things that are owner benefit on the chart of accounts.
Yeah.
So for example, have a line that says officer salary, and then have another line that says salaries. And that way I don't have to ask when I see $1 million of payroll, I don't have to ask how much of this was you, the owner, versus, it's just extra digging you have to do.
Right. We definitely like every S corp where the owner's on payroll. Yeah, that is a separate line item on our chart of accounts.
Yeah, 100%. And even things like officers, meals, and entertainment, or things like that.
Yeah.
Just throw the word officer on it, and if it's presented on a P&L alphabetically, you'll have just a group of officer lines that's easy to note that's SDE. You don't actually get more tax benefit by lumping it together to hide that it's yours, or that it's discretionary officer benefit or owner benefit. And so you might as well just separate it out, and then that makes it easier when and it's not just for selling. It's like when you're trying to get a loan, or you're trying to show a bank how much money you make, and they see your net profit number and it looks really weak. If you got that section of all those officer compensation and officer 401k, officer health insurance, officer meals and entertainment, then that banker can see that, and that stands out to them and says,
Right.
okay, yeah, this is the owner's, discretionary earnings in this thing, and that makes you look a lot stronger. Helps you get loans, helps you defend your business value. It just does a lot of good.
Right. So let's say, all right, so the business is qualified and they have 3 years of seller's discretionary earnings of 250K. What's next? Like, how do you determine an asking price? Are you looking at comps? Are you looking at like data, or do you say, okay, if it's in this industry and in this SDE range, I know it's this multiple, or like, where do you go from there?
Yeah, we usually look at it through several lenses. The first thing we do, and this is something that gets overlooked by a lot of people, is we look at the balance sheet, because I think that's, a lot of buyers and sellers, they get really myopic on the profit and loss statements, because they feel like that's the thing that drives the bus. But to me, you can learn a lot from a healthy balance sheet, or one that's saddled with lots of debt and liabilities. I want to be able to see, just as soon as I know the SDE or EBITDA, the earnings numbers, the adjusted earnings numbers, I know roughly what it's going to trade for, because I've just done a bunch of deals and I know kind of standard multiple ranges. And so I want to look at the balance sheet, and if I see debt that's close to what I think the business is worth, I already know this is going to be a problem, because no one wants to sell their business just to pay off the debt and then not have anything to show for it at the end. And so I'm always looking for those liabilities, short-term and long-term, because businesses are typically sold on a cash-free, debt-free basis. So I'm really looking for that cash, how much cash is sitting there, how much debt's sitting there. I'm trying to gauge the health of the company from the balance sheet. That helps me give a sanity check. And then I also will look at the assets listed and make sure I ballpark roughly what the physical stuff that's listed there on the balance sheet is worth, because that's kind of my first indicator of value. Is when you look at a balance sheet and ask some questions about it, you can typically get into like a liquidation value of a company by just figuring out what's the equipment worth, what's the inventory worth, what are those physical tangible assets worth. And so we do a balance sheet analysis, and we try to determine a rough like liquidation value of the company. If you were just to close the business and sell off all the stuff, like, what is that worth? And then we just kind of put that to the side, because a healthy business, that's usually not what the company is worth. That's just a reference point from the looking at the balance sheet. So I like to start there. And then the next thing we do is, we build up that recast of the profit and loss statement to show adjusted earnings. And that's going to be SDE or adjusted EBITDA. And that's where we figure out, basically you start with a net profit. You add back depreciation, amortization, any income taxes, any interest payments, to show kind of the EBITDA of the company, plus the owner's pay, perks, and benefits on a normal year. And if there's anything really unusual that happened, like I have a deal right now in Houston, I'm representing that they had a huge year in 2023, and then their 2024 was much smaller. And the reason 2023 was way bigger and 2024 was way smaller wasn't because anything bad happened to the company. They just had one special thing that happened in 2023. They had an international client that came in and made a huge order. And it was like a one-time, $1.5 million chunk of revenue
Yeah.
that they had never had before, and they'll probably never have again. And so that's called a normalization adjustment, is we will actually adjust 2023 back down to normal. Like if that international client hadn't showed up, which was highly unusual, like what would 2023 have looked like? And so we'll do stuff like that.
Are you normally taking like the most recent year or 3 years, or like depends on the deal?
Yeah, we usually look back at the last 3 full years, and also once we're halfway through the year like we are now, we'll also look back on a trailing 12-month basis to try to show like the most recent 12-month trend and compare that to the previous 3-year period. And then we have the weighting conversation, which just means, do we average all these year periods out, or do we weight them more heavily one way or the other? And so, that is its own kind of art form. And that's where a lot of people get really aggressive with valuations is if you have a growing company, for example, a fast growing company, this happens all the time in tech, for example, is the broker wants to value it based on the trailing 12 months. But we don't even have a single tax return that shows, the earnings power of the last 12 months. And so that's a lot of weighting to give it, when bankers usually look back at tax returns, and to them, those interim financials or the trailing 12s are a sanity check. Like they're just there to make sure that it hasn't gone in the crapper in the last 12 months. But they're not actually valuing it on that, because in the banker's eyes, nothing's real until it hits a tax return.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of times you get this disconnect, is like the broker or seller, they've had this banner first half of the year, and they want to weight it all on the last 12 months. And the buyer has to get a loan from a bank that they're like, well, that's nice, but I can only underwrite this based on the tax returns.
Right.
And so you get this huge valuation gap. And so we take that into account in our valuation. So ultimately we're trying to get the owner of the business the most we can that's actually going to be able to get banked and get closed, because it does us no good to get an offer in that then the buyer can actually get a loan for, So we look at comps. So we'll find those earnings numbers. We'll use some logic in how we're going to weight the last few years based on what we think we can defend. Like if it's growing and growing and growing, for example, and we in the last 6 months has still been growing, and we can show exactly why and how that's happening and why that's expected to continue, we may weight it 100% on the most recent full year's tax return. But if it's up and down and it varies highly, like that's not the right way to weight it. We might have to average it out over a few years. And so it's all about like the logic behind the weighting and getting that right. And there's some
what percent of owners are like, I thought it was worth more than you say?
95%.
Yeah.
It's very high. Like people think their business is worth more than it is most of the time. And part of our valuation process is just kind of showing the data behind it. So we'll go through all this with them. And this is how we do it is, there's an art form to this of kind of gently popping the valuation bubble to show them, here's where comps are coming in, and here's on the market comps, and here's recently sold comps. We'll look at both. And it's kind of hard to argue when, like, for instance, if you have a company that's, say, an IT company that's doing $500,000 in SDE earnings, and we show you 25 comps that were the same industry, the same business model, the same earnings size as yours, and where did they trade at? And there's a narrow, band of multiples that those traded at. And then what you want for your business is so far outside of that range that it makes no sense. And then we can go on the market and we can show other IT companies that are kind of similar to yours. And where are those asking prices at? And we can tell that owner, hey, why would someone pay twice as much for your company when they could go buy this one that's on the market at half the price that's very similar, or these other 25 have all sold for half the price that were very similar. And so we'll kind of try to get them to reality on that. But then we also take it one step further of looking at the bankability of the deal. So we'll create a hypothetical buyer with a hypothetical kind of standard down payment and show at today's interest rate what that debt is going to cost them. And then if you push the valuation too high, you can prove mathematically, hey, a buyer coming in with a 10% down or something, which is kind of a typical down payment, if they gave you the price you wanted, their debt payment would be more than you make in annual earnings. And so why would anyone sign up for that? They would be automatically losing money. They're buying a business because they want to be able to be profitable month one, and so you have to show that debt service coverage ratio and the bankability of it and how that math works. And that bankability test is usually your upper limit on how far you can push the valuation on Main Street.
Got it.
It kind of changes in the middle market once you get above a couple million of earnings, because it's just a different ball game. Like, people have bigger equity pieces they're putting down. They're typically putting a little less debt and more equity. They have more cash to chase fewer deals with, and then multiples trend higher, and they can kind of justify it because some of the buyers are public companies that are valued at huge multiples, and so they get like an instant boost to the value of the company if you merge in with a public company. So that's kind of another conversation. But in Main Street, which I would say, like, if your company's earning less than, say, $2 million of profit or SDE, then you pretty much have a pretty predictable, pretty narrow multiple range that we can find from running comps and then looking at the
4 times or what?
Yeah, I would say, like, it depends on the size and the industry is the biggest things, but I would say like 2 to 5 would be most common.
2 to 5. Okay.
And the low end of that would be a smaller deal that's doing construction or stuff that's non-recurring revenue that you have to go.
Hey guys, we want to take a quick break from the show just to tell you about our companies that make this happen. My name is Patrick Dichter, and I own Apple Tree Business Services. We do accounting and tax nationwide. So if you own a small to medium-sized business, we'd love to help. And we can also do financial due diligence for any acquisitions. You can check us out at appletreebusiness.com.
And speaking of acquisitions, this is Clint, your co-host. My company is called Dealonomy. You can find us at dealonomy.com. We are on a mission to just make it 10 times easier to buy or sell a small business. If you're a buyer, you probably feel like finding a good business to buy is like searching for a needle in a haystack. We have created the Needle Store, where you can just go find a great business that's turnkey, ready to purchase, with banks ready to lend on it. Go find you a good one. Go buy it at dealonomy.com. And if you're a seller, we're the only place you can sell your business for no commission, with a fast, free, guaranteed result. And so it's very innovative, easy button for buying or selling a business. Hope you join us at dealonomy.com.
All right. Thanks for supporting us. Now back to the show. So if we stick with this example, IT services business that has 500K of SDE, you give them the valuation, you set those expectations, and you're like, okay, this will trade for 3.5 or 4. We think, let's go to market. And then what? Like, you go write the description and then sim with them, and then you put it online, and then talk us like next steps from there of like putting it online, and then how do you filter through and like decide, who gets to talk to the seller?
Yeah. So we now have changed our model with Dealonomy to where we used to put an exact asking price.
Okay.
And how we tried to do it is we tried to do kind of like the most likely sales price and just price it right and nail it and go get it. And we had a good track record at my previous brokerage of hanging an asking price and generally getting it or getting very close to it at closing. But what we ended up doing now is we decided to let the market set the price. And so when we run comps, we'll create like a range of values and we'll display it to the owner in a bell curve. And we'll show them, based on where all these comps are falling, we think your most likely sales price range would be. So for this IT example, I might say, hey, you're going to get at least 1.8 million, but you might get as much as 2.4, but we think you're going to fall somewhere in here.
Okay.
And we show them all that math. And if you're ready to sell, we're going to guarantee we'll get you offers of at least 1.8 in 90 days or less, but we think you could go as high as 2.4. And we'll show you exactly why. And then our job is to build up the case of why this is an attractive deal and show, so we build the SIM with the help of the owner. And the SIM is a confidential information memorandum, which is just all the things you need to know about as a buyer. So you need the financials, but you also need to hear the story. You need to hear, why is the seller selling? We like to include a SWOT analysis. We like to include a video interview with the seller so people know who's selling and why are they selling it. I feel like that's been a very big benefit for buyers, is being able to like watch a podcast style interview with the seller.
Yeah.
And so we build out this really nice package that lives on our website, and that buyers that are qualified can sign a non-disclosure agreement and then go straight into that deal room and start looking through all that information and make an offer. But in our system, in that scenario, we just have an LOI builder on our site where you can quickly select. So once you've read all the information, you can click make an offer, and you can choose from drop downs and slide a slider for the purchase price. And it's a very slick process, but it's the way we're set up is if we peg the range at 1.8 to 2.4, we won't let you offer less than 1.8. So that's kind of like our minimum offer.
Okay.
And then if you want to have the most chance of getting your offer accepted, you slide it all the way to 2.4. It's kind of almost like the buy it now range would be the higher end of that range, where you can have confidence your offer would get accepted. But then we just let multiple bidders in there looking at it, and we negotiate and compete, and we find where the market agrees the right prices is somewhere in that fair value range.
That's neat. And is there a time limit on like how long it's on the market, or?
No, we have that 90-day clock because we have a $10,000 guarantee for sellers. So we're confident we'll get offers somewhere in that range in 90 days or less. It doesn't mean they have to accept one. So they can take their time and make sure they get a buyer they like and an offer they like, but we're off the hook for our guarantee as long as we've got some offers in the door.
Let's say the IT services owner gets 5 offers, right?
Yeah.
Then do you present the 5 to them, and then they say, I want to talk to these 5 people, or then what?
Yeah. So we'll present them, and then we're showing the numbers, but we're also trying to present the humans, because these business deals are very relational.
Totally.
And usually the buyer and seller are going to work together for a period of time during a transitional time. And so they have to like click, they have to like each other, trust each other, and want to work together. And so we're really looking for a few things. We're looking for a good offer financially. So we were looking for a strong down payment from a financially qualified buyer with a good purchase price and attractive terms. We're looking for all that, but we're also looking for, are you a values match for this? Do you have the right background to be successful here? Because we want you to be successful as a buyer. The seller wants you to be successful as a buyer, because often there's some seller financing involved, and they want to be confident that you're going to be able to make their seller financing payment. And so they want to make sure you win. But beyond just the self-interest, there's also just, they care, like they care about their company and their employees, and they want to make sure when they visit in a few years, everybody's not pissed off at the old owner for selling to this moron that's driving it into the ground. The seller wants that business to succeed and thrive and be proud to see their company continue to grow and be successful even after they leave. And so we're looking for all those intangible factors. And so in that example, like if 5 offers come in, we'll usually have 2 or 3 people that really stand out. It's like, okay, these are good offer from good people. And before we accept any of these, let's have some meetings with these 2 or 3 people. And then it's usually like the best combination of the human we like and the offer we like combination.
Okay, cool. And then total time from like on average, when the owner first starts talking to you and says, I want to sell, to when the deal closes, is this like 4 months, 8 months, 10 months? Like,
yeah, I'd almost like to put it at when the seller engages to sell to when it sells, because a lot of times it takes them a long time to just get over the mental hurdle
Yeah.
of deciding to sell. So sometimes they'll start talking to us about it, and then they'll go back and running the business for a while, think about it, and they'll come back. And sometimes that goes on for a couple of years before they decide, you know what, it's time. I'm ready. Let's do this. But once they make that decision that I'm going to sign up, let's build our package and let's go to market. My last firm, our average was about 9.5 months from start to finish, from engagement to closing. But with Dealonomy, because of the high-speed, high-tech systems we have and the process we're putting together that's really built for speed, we're hoping to get that down to about 6 months on average. And that's blazing fast for this industry. So, but I just want your listeners to understand, like, 6 months is still a long time in the real world, but in the M&A world, that's blazing fast. And so all of this takes time. Building the package takes a few weeks. Sometimes that takes about a month. And then you've got the marketing launch and all the negotiations with the buyers and the meetings you have to have, and getting it under contract takes, a month or two. And then after that, diligence takes a month or two, and the final items, legal and closing the deal and the financing approval, and it takes another month or two. And you add all that up, if everything goes perfect, it takes 5 or 6 months at the fastest.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's not a check the next day. And then I think most of our audience knows this, but they talk to 2 or 3 people, they sign an LOI, and then there's the whole due diligence period, and then making sure the bank approves the deal, making sure legal, gets ironed out on both sides with the purchase agreement, and then finally the closing, right?
Yep.
Okay. You have a hard job.
It's hard.
It's a long process, telling everybody their business is not worth as much as it is, and talking them off the ledge 12 times to get every deal done. It's tough.
The deal typically, and for any of you that have done this a few times, you know what I'm talking about, but like every deal tries to die several times. Like, especially between LOI and closing, it's emotional, it's tiresome, it's difficult, and just surprises pop up all along the way. And, the bank that promised you they were going to do this deal with these terms, sometimes they'll bail on you, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling for a new bank. Or the landlord that the seller said was going to be no problem renewing the lease with you, all of a sudden they said, you know what? I don't want to do this lease with you unless the seller stays on as a guarantor. And the seller says, no way, I'm not going to stay on as a guarantor. And all of a sudden you have this big landlord fight that pops up and threatens the deal. Or sometimes
that happened on my first deal. That was the rents that I did not see coming.
You had the
office
landlord
we
battle?
rent. Well, kind of. The office we rent, he had to sign off to the SBA lender, that they'll get paid first. And he's like out of the country. It's December. We literally can't get a hold of him. And then we finally get a hold of him. He's like, I don't want to sign that. And we're basically just like, look, you're going to lose this tenant no matter what. We're planning to stay in the office. Please, sign it. And then finally, he had to get somewhere where we had a computer, and it was, that was the big wrench that we were not expecting.
Yeah. So Patrick's talking about the landlord subordination agreement, right? That the SBA drops on you at the last minute. And so, landlords often, they have a lot of leverage and they don't have any incentive to sign that. But that's basically where the SBA, by their own regulations, the SBA says we have to have, it's called a landlord subordination or something. I think that's what it's called. It's a 1-page document. But it basically says if this SBA loan goes into default, we, the SBA lender, have the right to come into this building and take out all the stuff. We have the first right to the fixtures and inventory and all the stuff, because we're the first lien on this whole business. And, the landlord, often they think, no, that's my right. If they're not paying you, they're probably not paying my rent either. And I want the ability to lock this thing up and then, take the contents or or whatever. And so they're not really motivated because they've often had that right with the previous owner.
Right.
And they don't want to give up that right for you, especially the wet behind the ears brand new buyer they've never met before. Why would they give that up?
I get that.
And so, yeah, stuff like that pops up. And you got to be prepared for it.
What are the most common deal killers or issues that come up?
I'd say lately it's been banking. Like, banking has been the bane of our existence the last few years. I feel like banks, ever since the rising rates happened the last few years, and things have just gotten a little tighter. They're not playing as fast and loose as they used to. Ultimately, I think that's a good thing because it means, it's for the greater good, if you will. Like they're trying to keep the borrower safe, themselves safe, and the business ultimately safe. But that makes underwriting more conservative, and sometimes I feel like they're just asking for more and more and more data, and more and more. I don't know, just this year, when tariffs raise their head, all of a sudden the banks want to know, like, what's your tariff, mitigation plan, and what are, so now you've got to like not only have a business plan, but you've got to have, all this, all this evidence that you're not going to be SOL if tariffs hit your industry, things like that. So it just kind of adds up. The more and more political and geopolitical risks there are out there, the more hoops you have to jump through to get a government backstop loan. And so that's been the problem. And then we'll have sometimes in recent years, it feels like banks are trying to change deals on us more and more. Like we'll get a deal under LOI. The bank says they like it. They give a term sheet or whatever, and then it goes through their underwriting and goes to loan committee. And the next thing we know, they come back and say, hey, you know how the seller was going to finance 10% of this deal? We think they should finance 20% of this deal, or else we're not going to do this deal.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden,
I've also been there too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that's brutal, because now you have the bank kind of overstepping, in my opinion, like interfering with the deal. Like, I don't think that should be the bank's job. I think if the buyer, seller, broker, the lawyers and accountants are all, happy with the deal, like the bank should be able to look at it and say, we'll do it or we won't do it. But they should, like, when they say, we'll do it if you change this, this, and that, like, I think they're out of line.
Yeah.
And they're doing that more and more, and now you've got some big decisions to make because they're the ones making the loan. And so do you want to play hardball and risk more time and effort to go to a whole new bank when you're deep in the process and you're close to closing? Or do you want to just fold and accommodate their requests and change the deal?
That happened to me, and I had to walk away from deal. Before I bought Apple Tree, I was a month away from closing on a accounting business, and they said, can you send the interim financials? We're going to close in like June or July. The last 2 months, they send it over. The profitability dipped a little bit, and the underwriting team like freaked out, and they're like, what is going on? This business is cratering. And the owner was like, well, we bill hourly. People took summer vacations. We can't bill as much. Profitability dropped a little bit. Here's all our timesheets. Totally acceptable to me. Made perfect sense. And the underwriting team was like, okay, now instead of 15% down, Patrick, you have to come with 45% down.
Jeez.
Or we won't do this deal. And I was just like, I can't do that. I won't do that. And so the seller was just like, no, I'm not going to wait around for you to get another bank or go through this again. Like we're done. And it sucked. And ultimately I referred that deal to somebody else that paid 20% more than me. And so clearly it still got done. But so my next one, I had 4 banks that I got commitment letters from because I was like, I can't afford to have this like blow up again at the last minute. So yeah, banking is tricky.
So you got 4 commitment letters. Did you get
yeah. And they were all mad. They were like, why are you shopping me? And I was like, I can't afford to have what just happened, Like you don't like customer concentration. I don't like bank concentration, Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah. So for the sellers, like what can they do to like, I don't know, be good clients and get the deal done? And what should they be prepared for in terms of like how much to pay for legal and like to pay the broker and anything else that they have?
Yeah. That was a few questions. I'll go with what does a good seller look like? I think the best sellers, I try to prep them all for this expectation is the main thing you can do to help your cause is don't take your foot off the gas. So like I see this so much is
Yep.
the seller starts counting their chickens before they hatch. And so they think, all right, I'm about to get a few $1,000,000 here. I'm spending half my day browsing the boat I'm going to buy and the trip I'm going to take, and I'm taking my eye off the ball with just running this business. And I'm like, keep selling, keep driving the bus, keep your foot on the gas. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Be responsive. Like that's what I need from you as a teammate, as a seller is if you keep growing your business and the business just keeps getting more valuable and more attractive over time, and eventually we'll get the deal that you like.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take your foot off the gas, like just like what happened to you, Patrick, even a little dip, banks freak out about, and they start, if you have a negative quarter right at the end, they'll start projecting that out annually, and then they'll project that into infinity, and then they'll get all scared of doing the deal. And then the next thing you know, you don't have a deal. And so, so just finish strong. I like to say, go out like Peyton Manning or John Elway, where you won the Super Bowl your last year and then right off into the sunset. So that's what you need to do with your profitability and your operation is have your best year ever while you're trying to sell the company, and then load us up with all the information you can, and don't keep any secrets from us. So treat your broker kind of like you would a trusted attorney. Mm-hmm. It's like your attorney can't help you with stuff you don't tell them about. And so like good, bad, or ugly, like if your GM, wakes up one day during our process and says, I'm going to give you my 3 weeks, notice, but I'm leaving to go to this competitor. Like tell us, because then we can get ahead of it and figure out a plan of how to deal with it. But if we just proceed and then the buyer gets under LOI and then in due diligence, they figure that out, which they probably will, then all of a sudden they're walking because you were dishonest in their eyes because you kept something that was pertinent to them. And so, every challenge can be framed as an opportunity. Every, bit of hair on the business can be disclosed and pitched to buyers as opportunity to improve and grow the business if they fix that. Mm-hmm. But if you act like your business is perfect and then we find out that skeleton's in the closet later, that hurts your credibility and it makes buyers walk and it wastes all of our time. And so the best thing you can do is just really disclose, keep your foot on the gas, be responsive with document requests and information requests, take meetings after hours, be flexible to accommodate buyer schedules and broker schedules. Cause these deals don't happen in 9 to 5 hours a lot of the time.
Right.
They happen nights and weekends. And so just be prepared that it's going to be a mutually beneficial season of your life that hopefully is only about 6 months long. We're going to be kind of working 2 jobs, running the business and then responding to deal stuff. And then the last little bit, LOI to closing, is the worst part because that's where you're going through diligence and that's where you have the most workload for the deal stuff that I can't do for you is coming through those diligence requests. So you just kind of have to grin and bear it, trust your broker, trust the process, keep your foot on the gas. Like that's all the things you can do, to be a great client. I know you had a couple other questions, but before I get to those, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I know you've been through diligence a bunch of times. I know you do quality of earnings support now and diligence support for people. Could you give a seller some words of wisdom in terms of like, what are some things an owner can do now or in advance of the sale that makes diligence 10 times easier? Because that's by far the hardest part.
Yeah.
of the deal for the seller. So what can they do to make their lives easier?
Yeah, I think mentally you said it well. Like it's going to be a second job. It's like moving your house. It always takes longer and it's more painful than you thought. So just know that there's a huge information request that's coming. So as much as you can, try to send the information quickly. If there's like legal review that comes back to you, you don't want to be the person where it's always sitting with you for more than a couple of days. Like you want to turn things around and get it back. I think another thing that's helpful is maybe a weekly call between seller and buyer, just to be on the same page, keep the relationship going, make sure you're not holding things up. And this is hard. Sometimes you have an older seller that like they have to ask their accountant for everything. So it's like, hey, can we get a report out of QuickBooks that shows the AR aging summary? And they might not know how to do that. Or, a customer list sorted so we can see customer concentration, like who your biggest customers are. Mm-hmm. So if you have somebody else on your team or an accountant or, somebody that you can trust that's not going to mention that the company might be for sale, that can just help send all that information, that goes a really long way. Those would be the biggest things. Like just know it's a lot and try to be responsive, and the deal will keep moving.
We try to even start gathering stuff at engagement time instead of all at diligence time, because we know the things that every buyer is going to want from the seller.
That's huge.
And so, it's easy for the broker to just get a balance sheet and P&Ls and do the valuation and build the SIM and go to market. But then you haven't pulled any of the diligence stuff yet. And so when you get under LOI, all of a sudden, instead of, let's pretend it's 50 things the buyer needs on average, which that might even be low, like it's probably 50 to 100 is the average amount of items that you get requested when you're selling your business. And so most of those are predictable and happen over and over again. So we'll give you a pre-due diligence checklist.
Nice.
And say, hey, why don't you go ahead and start gathering this stuff? Because there's things like the average business owner they don't even know if they've got corporate documents or where they are, if they have them, and things like that. They take forever because they are embarrassed. They're like, oh crap, I don't even know if I ever did those. I don't know if I did corporate documents
my S corp election, my operating agreement, my my cybersecurity policy, like what? Yeah.
And so sometimes they're either scrambling to find them or like create them or whatever if they haven't done them before. And so just letting them know in advance, like every single buyer is going to want this stuff. So could you just find your insurance policies? Could you find your corporate documents, your organizational documents?
Yeah.
Things like that. And go ahead and get those ready, and we'll go ahead and start populating a data room. In my world, in the perfect world, what we're trying to get to with Dealonomy is when an offer gets accepted. So the LOI gets accepted, that immediately unlocks the data room. And in the data room, we already have 80% of what the buyer is going to ask for anticipated and in there. And so then I can tell the buyer, hey, don't just send us a giant spreadsheet of like 1 million diligence items. Just look in this data room at all the stuff we've already given you, and then just give us a much shorter list of anything else you need that's not already there. And then it makes it much more manageable if you get a dozen items requested instead of a list of 100 things, because we had the foresight to put that in there. So that's a
huge
big thing. And it spreads the work out over a longer period of time versus having to scramble for everything in a couple weeks.
Yeah. And the other questions were like, what should a seller think of budgeting for like legal, and like how's a broker get paid?
Yeah. So legal can range pretty widely. I've seen as low as $2,000. I've seen as high as $150,000. Like I'd say on average, a lot of our Main Street deals, the seller ends up paying like 5, 10, 15,000. And the buyer usually pays maybe a little more, because oftentimes the buyer drafts the purchase agreement and then the seller's attorney just kind of redlines it, reviews it. And they don't have quite as much of the heavy lift as the buyer's team does. And so, I'll usually say, be mentally prepared for like 10, 15 grand. But if you can get it for 2 to 5 because you got a nice friendly purchase agreement that was really easy to review very quickly, then that's great. But if you end up playing lawyer ping pong, or you have a really aggressive, and it varies too, because if you have like a private equity buyer that has a really big time document, they have a big time document package from high power attorneys, then you might have to get a more expensive attorney and spend more time on it, because there's going to be more fine print and more things to push back on. And so that's kind of the downside of some of those buyers, like some of the private equity buyers, that they might offer a better purchase price, but the deal could be potentially more legal costs and more painful, more fine print, because they want to have earnouts. They want to have more, performance-based stuff happen with the documents, which makes it more complicated.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
And then brokers, you want to talk about broker money stuff?
Yep.
Brokers are pretty reticent to like share their fees, or like what, because like I guess there's this legend that we'll get in trouble with the SEC or something if we start publishing or telling everybody that like they view it like we're colluding or something on what we are charging. And that's how that's how the realtors got in trouble, I think.
I see.
They're all doing the same publicly known percentages and things. But in general, most brokers get paid by the seller at closing most of their fee. So sometimes they'll take a retainer that they credit against the fee, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's zero up front and all of it's at closing. But more and more are getting to some upfront money or retainer money just to protect their time interests. And I wouldn't judge a broker if they ask for money up front versus not, because some of the best ones are asking for some upfront money or retainer money. It doesn't mean they're bad at their job. It might mean they're the best and they don't want you wasting their time.
Yeah.
But a word of warning, there's two firms that I'm thinking of that are have this MO. Like if you ever see one that's doing seminars at a hotel with shiny suits and promising the world and then asking for a really big upfront fee, I'm talking like 30, 40, 50, 60 grand upfront, like run, do not use that. Like that's, I think there's some bad firms out there that make most of their money on upfront fees and don't deliver results very well. But the ones that do ask for upfront, a lot of times they're asking for 5 grand, 10 grand, or a 5,000 a month retainer that's credited against it or something like that. It's not as extreme as that, 50 grand check. But yeah, I've had quite a few clients where they were really soured on brokers because they bought hook, line, and sinker, these high pressure sales tactics from the shiny suit big firms that I am not going to say their names from the show, but they're very litigious and they're very, I don't know. I think they give our industry a bad name. They ask for too much up front. They don't deliver good results, but typically the sell side brokers, depending on the size of the deal, can range from anywhere from like a 10, 12, 12.5% on a small deal, like a 6-figure type of deal, to, as little as 2, 3, 4, 5% on the 8-figure deals, on the multi-million-dollar deals. And it usually is kind of like falling somewhere in between those extremes. But our range at Dealonomy is always 0% to sell. So we're the only 0% commission for sellers company out there that I'm aware of, because we have a buyer network that pays us. They pay us membership fees, and then a small success fee at closing comes from the buy side. And so when you get offers on our platform, you get 100% of those proceeds at closing with no broker fee taken out.
It's a good deal.
Yeah, sellers tend to like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Sweet. Well, this has been awesome, just a peek under the hood. Hopefully people get some good tidbits in terms of, how valuations work, what they can do to be ready, and what the whole process looks like. Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, this is a fun conversation. I love getting into the nitty gritty here. Hopefully, if you're an owner that's thinking about selling, you've taken some nuggets out of this that you can apply to just make your company more ready to sell. I mean, just have good books, close them promptly, make sure the business can function well with or without you. So take a vacation, make sure the wheels don't fall off of your business. Work on the things that do fall off and make sure this thing's transferable, has clean books, and that you've got your documentation in order, and you pick a good broker, and you just run a honest, straightforward process and get lots of good marketing attention on your deal, and you're going to maximize your odds of a successful exit.
Awesome. Great advice. So, all right, man, that's a wrap. We'll link to Dealonomy in the show notes, and people have more questions before the next time we do this, feel free to submit them. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.